Hangout later, it's going to start with Taylor Swift.
We're now streaming YouTube into YouTube.
Okay. We can actually start now. Okay. Welcome to DNS. What do all of these letters actually mean? First off, I'm Ian Carrico. Hi. I'm a web performance artist at Vox Media. So we do Vox.com, SB Nation, The Verge, Eater, Racked, Curved, and other sites. You can find me online as I am Carrico on Drupal.org, GitHub, Twitter, and my website.
Howdy, I'm Dustin Yautz. I'm a support engineer at Four Kitchens. We're a full-service Drupal shop based out of Austin, Texas. But I currently live in Boston because I like the weather. I don't know. I go by Mills Yoptaf pretty much everywhere, so you can find me all over the place at that.
Wait, that actually has a pronunciation?
Yeah.
Say it again.
Mills Yoptaf.
Nice.
So what is this? We are going to talk about A records, AAAA records, Cname records, NS records, text records, MX records, and SOA records. Do any of these letters look familiar?
Yes.
We're just going to give a brief history of the internet. Like why do we have DNS? What is the point of all of this? You probably know, the internet came from ARPANET, which was a Department of Defense research project back in the 60s. This is what it looked like December of 1969. It had exactly 4 computers hooked up to it. They were all relatively close to each other, but they made it all the way out to Utah. So at this point, the internet is pretty manageable. Basically, you can just have all of this written on a sticky note, and you can connect any of these computers to find what you need. But then it progressed. This is June 1970. We're 6 months later. We're now across the country. Next, we have December 1970. Things are getting more complicated. Next, again. And you see, like it's getting more and more complicated. We're only about 3 years into this entire experiment. And I think the next slide will be up to 47 nodes. These are just the map nodes. That doesn't mean that these are just 47 computers at this point. Any of these nodes could have any number of computers hooked up to them. And you need to be able to connect to those computers to get whatever information you're looking for. Next. So yeah, so I think, is that the last one? Yeah. So you see it's getting more and more complex, and this is still 40 years ago. And then the World Wide Web was born. So the internet is not the World Wide Web. So the World Wide Web was created, that's a rough representation of what the internet looks like. It was created by a guy named Tim Berners-Lee in 1993. He's a lovely fellow. He lives in Boston. I've actually met him without realizing it. It was kind of embarrassing. 1993, AOL begins mailing out their floppy disks. Not even CD-ROMs, they're floppy disks. Next up, the World Wide Web goes commercial. So at this point, the internet is no longer a thing just for researchers. It is now a thing that commercial interests can be on. This is when Wired.com starts probably the first, I believe they're officially the first website to have ads. At this point, ads were so new on the internet, they were basically just links to information. Wired's advertisers, they didn't have websites, so Wired would make a page that said who they were and gave a phone number so you could call the company once you clicked on the ad. Apparently, they had something like 25% click-through rates on those ads, which if you know anything about ads, that's like astronomical. But people didn't know what they were yet. To the latest number I could find was 2012. There's an estimated 8.7 billion devices online. That's computers. That's phones. That's the locks on really good hotel rooms. All kinds of things are now internet devices. And you have to be able to get to them, to find where they are, to say, hey, tell me a thing that I would like to know. And that's why we have DNS. At this point, we're really going to need a bigger boat. And so DNS, the thing that people like to equate it to is a phone book. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's roughly the best we have. Computers, all they know is very basic information. They know numbers when it comes to internet routing. So, 192.168.1.1. That's where you point your browser when you want to beat up your router because your internet dropped out again. 127.0.0.1, it's a very special number that is your own computer. That's more than we need to talk about right now. But there are all these numbers. That's all your computer knows. But do we really want to keep 8.7 billion numbers in our head? Do we want to have them written down in a book? Not necessarily. So we got DNS. What you're probably most familiar with, the DNS system, is TLDs. TLDs are top-level domains. This is the thing at the end of an address that denotes kind of what type it is. So at this point, kind of a dry talk, kind of dry information. So we've decided we're going to insert some dad jokes.
How much does Chinese food weigh?
I don't know.
About wonton.
So you're the occasional.
Yeah.
You're the pop-up support.
Color
pop-up.
commentary.
Okay.
So very the very basic stuff we have with ARPA. So ARPA comes from ARPANET. So this is a very basic TLD that is a very kind of structural thing. It's not the kind of thing you can go and buy for yourself. You can't have your name.arpa. That's not going to happen.
Did you hear the news? FedEx and UPS are merging.
I didn't.
They're going to go by the name Fed Up from now on.
These are country-specific TLDs. So these you might have seen. .co.ca is for Canada. Nowadays, they've been able to just abbreviate it to .ca, which makes a lot more sense. .zh, is that
China.
Switzerland? Oh, it's China, okay. .uk is the United Kingdom.
.ly is Liberia, right?
It is.
Yep.
Which is kind of problematic.
Yes.
What's Forrest Gump's password? One Forrest, one.
Nowadays, we have IDNs, so internationalized country code top-level domains. I mean, you think .zh, obviously that means China to us. But what does that mean to the Chinese? If they're not either used to it or they just don't think in English. We've now kind of upgraded the smarts of the internet so it can understand the full UTF range. So these TLDs can come in a lot more varieties.
So you have the first one's China, the second one's Taiwan, and the third one is Russia. I asked my dad what his 5-year plan was. I don't have 20/20 vision.
That's a time-limited joke.
It
That
is.
is.
Good for 1 year.
And then you have the GTLDs, the generics. So your .coms, your .orgs, your .nets. These are the ones you're probably most used to. So like I said, 1994 was the first time that www was allowed to be commercial. That's when people started being issued .com domain names. Before that, they weren't around. .org, originally this was supposed to be for organizations, but that was never really well defined. The original idea was for nonprofits and NGOs. But basically anybody can get these. Same with .nets. Along with these, you'll have things like
Next slide.
Yeah.
A 3-legged dog walks in the bar and says to the bartender, "I'm looking for the man who shot my paw."
So nowadays, this is only in the last couple of years, they've released a whole slew of new generic TLDs. So they have .republican, .ninja, .force. The idea here is we're kind of running out of human readable domain names, so let's expand the options. And that's where these guys come from. I think .horse is probably my favorite right now. It's pretty great. It's just kind of nonsensical.
I'm a big fan of .xyz.
.xyz is an excellent one as well.
I own one of those.
So
You and Google both.
those can't be they don't ever get combined with the country ones, right?
No. Yeah, the country would be
Either
by
go
itself.
one way or the other.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Which
very
one's
last
yours?
thing has to be a top-level domain, and you can't bundle them up.
And the interesting thing about these, and this is actually true with every domain type, is whoever is the registrar for those domains. So .com is actually owned and operated by VeriSign. But there's a bunch of organizations who bought things like this. So like .republican is actually owned and operated by the GOP. They can put their own restrictions on each domain. So for example, what are some good restrictions on domains?
Well, EDU has
EDU.
restrictions.
EDU has restrictions.
Museum.
.museum has restrictions. You have to be a museum. So while a lot of these generic domains you can buy any of, there are some that you can if you can only do it if you're a specific. I think .bank, same thing. You have to be a bank to own a .bank domain.
Yeah, getting a .edu is actually a giant pain. I used to work at the University of Texas, and one day my boss walked in. We worked in the libraries, and he was like, I'm really tired of www.lib.utexas.edu. Can we just get, I don't know, utlibrary.edu? And I just gave him a blank look. Like, that's not gonna. You literally have to be an accredited university institution, and you get one of those.
Yeah.
And a lot of schools chose poorly back in the 90s, and they have kind of awkward domain names nowadays.
There were some other schools that weren't universities or colleges that got them early on, and then they stopped it.
Mhm.
So like high school can't get one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
I asked my dad for his best dad joke, and he said, "You."
Oh.
So we're talking about all these different TLDs. One of the things that I think is important to realize when it comes to domain names, a lot of people didn't really think about this in the beginning. This is your identity on the internet. If you're Google, you want google.com because you want people to be able to go to your website, send you email. If you have your own personal domain, you want that to be yours. But domain names are a time-limited thing. You buy it for a year or 2 years or 3 years, and then you have to renew it. And you have to remember to renew it. Because there's a lot of skeezy things out there, these scripts that just go through and they look for things that are about to expire, and they snap them up the instant they do, and then they try to ransom them back to you. And that's just kind of gross and jerky. So you got to think about this. Yourname.com, university.edu. I did that backwards. One of my favorite stories recently, Walmart.horse. He's used to be a local guy. He just moved. There's a guy, Jeff Jacks, who was a webcomic artist based out of Northampton. .horse became available as a TLD, and him and some of his friends were like, "This is great. We should make some horse jokes." And what they realized was, with DNS, there are some that have restrictions, but for a lot of these, you buy the domain name and you can point it at whatever you want. It's just a name that can point somewhere. So he bought Walmart.horse. And all he did was point Walmart.horse to Walmart.com. That's as far as it went. And within, I think, 2 days, he had Walmart lawyers on the phone. Because they are very concerned about their identity. And even as a goofy joke, even as just a redirect, they didn't want that to happen. Now, there's no laws against that. But when you're dealing with a company like Walmart, there's a lot of pain they can bring on you that is illegal. So yeah, you gotta think about these things. So turn it over.
All right. So IP addresses. All an IP address is, we kind of talked this earlier, it's just an address to get to your house or your TLD. So a TLD, when you look at yourname.com or iancarroll.com or walmart.com, all it does is it takes the name and converts it into an address, the IP address that we're supposed to be looking at. So most websites, you could, if you had some painful desire, just use the IP address to get to that site. It's a convenience that we have the entire TLD system built to do this. So to get these, all the rest of these slides is all the records that we have and the record types on how to get from a TLD of some kind, actually a fully qualified domain name, to a address in some way, shape, or form. So A records. Yay, A records. These are your first and basic record. An A record maps directly to an IPv4 address.
Is that IPv6?
No.
No.
We'll actually get to
But I like where your head's at.
Yeah.
I just realized I had 2 slides in here about IPv4 and IPv6 that I forgot to add to the index. I'm not smart. So I'm just going to tell them quickly while I'm doing the A records. IP version 4 is what we're used to right now. So that's 127.0.0.1 192.168.1.1 or 8.8.8.8.8. That's Google's DNS servers. These are the IP addresses you're used to seeing in some way, shape, or form. There are always 4 digits of between 0 and 255 each section, and there are certain sections that are reserved for internal use and certain sections that are reserved for the World Wide Web as we know it. A record maps directly to an IPv4, and that's it. It's nothing else. It's a simple 0 or a name to number record.
Did you hear about the guy who invented lifesavers? He said he made a mint.
AAA records, these are relatively new. These are exactly like A records, except they are for IPv6. So IPv6 is, because we are out of IPv4 addresses, because when we first made the system, we're like, millions? We're never going to need more than millions. We're going to need more than millions. We created IPv6, which is a 128-bit address, which means you can have 2 to the 128th addresses in the system, aka a lot more. Hopefully we'll need to reach.
Never run out of those.
We're going to run out of these one day, just hopefully far into the future. But this is exactly like an A record, goes directly to an IP address, just a IPv6 address. Generally speaking, most websites don't need to use these quite yet. It's good to kind of think of this in the back of your head of eventually you're going to need an IPv6 address, but for the next couple of years, we're safe.
So does a domain have both an A and a quad A?
Yes. If you want to be accessible on both IPv4 and IPv6 networks, you have to have both records.
Okay.
But they can point to the same place, just
right. To the same page. 2
different numbers for the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why 4 A's?
I actually don't know. I think they were, this is purely a guess, but A, good, AA, connotation, AAA has a connotation, 4 A's does not. I really think that was it. Right, AAA, and welcome to the Alcoholics Anonymous records.
Fun fact about the IP system, when it first came out, the original first number was based on the NCAA playoff brackets. I don't know if that's a fun fact or a really nerdy fact.
It's
a little of both.
So that, to be able to have a 4A record, you have to have an IPv6 address.
Yes.
Which must depend on your host and whether they have.
Generally, yes, your host will have it. So most things, like if anyone ever used, the hosting company I use, which is Ocean, DigitalOcean. When you create a server in DigitalOcean, half of their centers right now have IPv6, and you can click a checkbox to say, I want IPv6, and then it'll just give you the address.
But that you have to
Yeah,
have
the whole
that
infrastructure has to have that.
Yeah.
Yep. And if they support it, they will tell you.
A ham sandwich walks into a bar and orders a beer. Bartender says, sorry, we don't serve food here.
Cname. Cname stands for canonical name record. So this is an alias for another name. This cannot be at the apex. So the most common thing that a lot of people use for this is they'll put like mail.theirdomain.com and point it to ghs.google.com. And that is pointing to Google servers, so it'll go to like Gmail. And all that does is say, okay, this is going to point to this other domain and get that domain's IP address, and that's where we're going to forward it to. And another domain kind of handles it. This cannot be at the apex, meaning if your domain was, say, iancarrico.com, then the record for iancarrico.com cannot be a CNAME. What can be a CNAME is www.iancarrico.com or cdn.iancarrico.com, things like that. And the reason being, very complex RFC on why, but it'll interfere with your index records is the practical reason.
So it has to be an A record for the CNAME to point at.
The CNAME will eventually load, like technically speaking, you could have a CNAME that goes to another CNAME record that goes to another CNAME record.
But resolves.
But
to
it
an
will
A record.
eventually resolve to an A
There
record.
has to be an A
Yes.
record before you can have a CNAME.
Correct. Somewhere along that chain, there has to be an A record. But if you put your CNAME at, let's say, iancarroll.com goes to this CNAME, then all of my mail records won't work. So you will never get email again. This is why a lot of domains,
Say that again?
you won't get your email if you have a CNAME at your apex. And this is why a lot of hosts that say do a CDN hosts will say, we want you to have it at your site at www.something.com, and then that www CNAME to our hosts, and then that will direct them to the correct IP address band where they are in the world. That being said, there are now certain hosts that will say you can have, I forget what they call it, but it's something like CNAME for your apex record that isn't technically a CNAME. They're just hosting your DNS for you. So they're hosting a bunch of A records and then just acting like it's a CNAME for your thing. They call it something different.
Two peanuts were walking down the street. One was assaulted.
DNS records, name servers. So name servers are where all of the records are actually held. So let's say that you grab your domain and you register it through namecheap.com. Namecheap.com will have its own name servers, so you can host all of your DNS there. Or optionally, you can do something like sign up for Amazon's Route 53 and then host all of your domain records there. And if you host all your domain records there, then at Namecheap, you're going to put Amazon's name servers in for your name server records at your registrar. So all the name servers are just where the rest of your DNS records are. Generally speaking, it'll be the exact same place, and you'll probably never have to touch your name server records. Only if your registrar is a different place than where your DNS is will you ever have to change this.
Why do chicken coops only have 2 doors? Because if they had 4, they would be chicken sedans.
Love reading today's. Text records. Text records are simple text records. All they are is to hold text in some way, shape, or form. These are commonly used for things like domain verification. So Google will tell you, go to your registrar and say, put in a text record that says Google key verification and a random string of numbers. And this is so that Google can ping your DNS servers and say, I want the text records for yourdomain.com, and it will return back saying Google site verification and the key that they gave you, and like, awesome, you have that. It's also used for things like DKIM, confirming that email came from a specific domain. The public key will be put in a text record. You could technically have a text record that just says, stop looking at my text records. I kind of want to set my domain to do that now. But it's simply text. It doesn't resolve to an IP address. It's just a way that people can grab text directly from a domain and have some simple records.
How do you make a Kleenex dance? Put a little boogie in it.
MX records, mail records, because you've got mail. MX records just point to where your mail is going to be. So generally you'll have more than one MX records, and it'll be tied with a priority number and a domain name. So the priority number is what priority to use which mail server. Lower numbers, higher priority. And then, so most commonly you have Google Apps. It'll be like 5 goes to aspmx.google.com or something like that. And 2 is like aspx2.google.com. And the next one is asps3.google.com, things like that. But this is just pointing to your mail records. This is incredibly important because if they're not set up correctly, you will not get mail. Mail is important. At the same time, this is the one that every client I've worked for freaks out about the most because the idea of not getting their email is beyond anyone at the moment. Mail systems are incredibly resilient. So if your MX records are, say, down for 3 hours and not correct, the mail will not be delivered. It will just be held by the sending server until the MX record is accurate. And then it'll be sent along. So if these are wrong for a brief period of time, don't worry, breathe, fix them. You have about 3 days to fix them for most mail servers. I've had to explain to the clients they don't like those thoughts.
2 guys walk into a bar. The third one ducks.
Oh.
SOA records, or start of, zone of, authority records. This I have only ever seen on Amazon actually be referred to this. You will probably never see this record. There is only one record for this for every domain, and it has the name server and the domain administrator's email. This is the authoritative where you can find everything else record. This on Amazon's Route 53 is kind of what the name server records are. They just refer to them as SOA records. Generally, you will never be able to touch or change this because it's set with your registrar. But you can change like your name server, which will then change this. But it's a 3 letters that occasionally come up, and this is the most authoritative part of DNS.
I had a dream that I was a muffler last night. I woke up exhausted.
And more. There are a bunch other DNS types. I have worked on the internet for the past long time. Long time. I don't want to think about how long I've been working on the internet. All of those domains or record types are the only ones I've ever touched. So there are some that are very specific and very specialized. I have never once seen anyone need to use them, and that goes for a variety of reasons. But that is all of the ones you'll ever probably touch. Now, there's one thing that's missing from this list that your registrar might have shown before, and that's a URL redirect record. Has anyone's registrars ever shown like you can do a redirect? Okay, your registrar is actually lying to you. There is no such thing as a redirect DNS record. What those registrars are doing is they're putting a record towards their domain, and then when someone gets a request there, they are redirecting it through a web server. So if you see that, that's not really a DNS record. That's them just providing a helpful service. It's kind of like if you were to set up your server to redirect one domain to another. Yes?
So if I wanted to have like Walmart.course, for example, and redirect this
For example.
I can't set that up with DNS.
No.
I need to host.
You need to have a web server, or your registrar has to have a server somewhere. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of important, because if Route 53 is the big one. It's now become a big DNS record host. They don't have any 301 redirects, and some clients freak out like, how am I supposed to do this? Set up your own web server to do that, is the answer.
What is Beethoven's favorite fruit?
I'm doing this one. Okay, thank you. Banana. So my favorite. I literally was giggling for like 3 minutes after reading that last night. Now that we've had this, we have.
I walked into the kitchen yesterday and I said to my dad, "Hey, I'm hungry." And my dad said, "Hi, hungry. I'm Dad."
He's a bad man.
Well, we were having dinner and Dad spilled his peas on the table. He looked right at me and said, "Oh no, I have just peed on the table."
Dad asked me, "Have you heard about the new movie, Constipation?" I was all like, "What? No." And he said, "It never came out." Who even calls a movie Constipation?
My dad and I were going past the aquarium. He said to me, "How many tickles does it take to make an octopus laugh?" And he said, 10 tickles. But what? Tentacles. Hey Dad, can you make me a sandwich?
What did Dad say?
Abracadabra. You are a sandwich.
No. I hate you, Facebook video.
You are a sandwich. Yes, I am a sandwich.
Congratulations, you're all now that joke survivors. So thank you. Are there any questions on, yes?
The various sort of other types of DNS types, are they primarily for sort of internal registrar use, or are they just not used much because they're deprecated or otherwise sort of for weird corner cases?
Well, so one of the newest ones is a DNSSEC record. So in 2009, a guy named Dan Kaminsky realized he could break DNS. He figured out how to inject bogus information into the system and make the system trust it, which kind of a bad thing. So they came out with DNSSEC, which is a cryptographic way of ensuring that the domain name servers are only receiving information that is valid. So that's one of the newest ones. So yeah, there's lots of like edge cases and very special case things that go along with that. But yeah, the list of DNS records is very long.
Yeah, there's an entire Wikipedia page of like everything and what they're for, and really often just links the RFC of a R4, and I've never used one of them. Yes?
Can you explain what name server glue is? You know what I'm talking about?
I have never heard that phrase before.
You go to any one of these tools to check your DNS records and see if there's a problem.
Mhm.
If most of my client sites, I do exactly what you said we never have to do. They're registered at one place and posted somewhere else. So I do reset name servers all the time.
Mhm.
And I very frequently get it's just a yellow warning. It's not, it says it's just slower. But
I've seen that before,
I
but it's
just-
not really
I've read the
defined anywhere.
explanations,
Yeah.
but I haven't gotten my head around what it means.
Yeah.
I've never heard that phrase, but I wonder if it's something
Glue, yeah.
that I have seen many registrars who have like their own specific term.
No.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's not just a
Hmm.
register.
But it's
No.
something to do with speed, like if you were set up a.
Yeah, if you're checking your records, a site DNS, you'll typically, get pass warning, fail, whatever. So it's one of the warnings. 'Cause your name servers don't have glue. Or I'm not saying it exactly right, but it's basically that. I'll see if I can
I have no idea. If you look it up, I'd be interested in seeing what that
Sounds
is.
very interesting.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find one for you.
I've seen that
Very
before
few
myself
Do you have
too.
a computer?
I have one more record type question.
Yeah.
SPF, Sender Policy Framework?
SPF is usually, isn't that,
It's
isn't that
It's one
usually
of my
text record?
choices, and that's why I want to
yeah.
know what the heck it is.
DKIM
What
is
is it?
SPF. Oh.
SPF is a text
Yeah, so it's,
Their
There's
email,
certain format.
email authentication.
so yeah, it's a text record, but it's a specific kind. So it's the same thing. It's similar to DKN, where
Okay.
it's a specific text record that stores a key or something. I know I have it on my domain. If you put it in once, yeah.
Well, you define your mail servers. You're saying what are legitimate mail servers
Yeah.
for this domain.
Oh yeah.
Is
And
is
then-
IPs for?
Yeah.
Right.
Usually it just you can just have it automatically include any of your MX records, or if you want to specifically give other ones
Okay.
as it being allowed to send, and some places will adjust their spam score if it matches, they get a better score, and if it's a mail server that doesn't match, then they'll make it negative.
Yeah.
Looks like a glue record is essentially just a record used to allow you to have a name server that's hosted on the domain that the name server is name server is for.
When your name server is different from your actual domain. I'm just trying to
Interesting.
It looks to be a practice that's probably handled with one of the regular types.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting. I do have all of my important DNS I now host at Amazon, so because they have failover. And if you ever had your DNS fail before, failover is great. Any other questions?
Are there any good DNS cleanup tools that you can recommend?
I've never seen a good cleanup tool, no. Obviously, if you have a domain that has a bunch of records, like I've only ever had to manually go over things, which kind of sucks.
I've walked into a situation where everything is already set up, and
Yeah.
occasionally we've had like power outages,
Mhm.
and when I bring everything back up, there'll be like a DNS address that I have never seen before, and I don't know necessarily
What
like
it's for.
where to go to like clean up, or where these kind of phantom DNS addresses are coming from.
I have no idea.
Like actual entries on the record, or different like IP addresses?
Different IP addresses, and so like I will have rebooted something, and there will be I know what like my primary DNS is, and my alternative one is, and it won't be one of those. And I don't know if it's somewhere, like if it's like some phantom address somewhere that.
Yeah, so pointing back to the DNS poisoning, like for the longest time, DNS has been kind of a trusted system. So it's just kind of like, we'll take any information from anybody. So it could be that your computer just found something else first and is trying to use it. It could also be like, it could be something, there are a bunch of reserved internal addresses, like the 10 dot addresses, the 127 dot addresses, 172 dot addresses. And sometimes routers will give those out as placeholder addresses.
Okay.
And then your computer needs to realize that's bogus and pick up the other ones as the preferred. That's what that'll be a lot of times. But yeah, if it's not like a 10 dot or a 172 or a 192, I would say you can like run a reverse search against that IP.
Oh, okay.
And that way you can figure out where it's from and see. It's probably unlikely, but it could be something harmful.
It seems to be. It starts with a 10, so it's in the right.
If it's a 10, then it's going to be internal. So that's something with your router. So yeah, that's fine.
So these slides are up on my GitHub if you want to take a look at them. Also at imcco.howtodns. Probably more questions.
Do they include the jokes?
They do include the jokes.
Okay.
Is there a joke-free version they can download?
No.
No.
Just no. And there's also on all the slides are speaker notes that have kind of more information and some links and stuff like that.
Are you going to put them on the Nerd Summit page?
They're also on the Nerd Summit page, or I will add them to the page. Yes.
Could you show that again?
Yeah.
So what is .co?
Company.
No, it's not.
It's not?
It's actually a country-based TLD.
It is?
But everybody uses it as, because I did this for my mother-in-law. I found out later that I was like some Eastern European country.
I own 2 .co domains now, CARRI.co.
I've been trying for years to get, my name is Dustin, so I wanted dust.in, but that is the nation of India. Incredibly difficult to get a domain name for that, so I just kind of gave up.
It's Columbia.
Columbia, there we go.
Interesting.
What is Columbia?
I guess I should have known that because it is their IFC code.
You didn't mention .rocks. That's another one might be.
Oh yeah. Pretty good.
.health and .media. We have .healthcare. Yeah, that's a big one.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.